All right, it is Drive Safe Dave here on BCB Live, talking to Jeremy Thone, right?
Jeremy Thone, yes, sir.
How are you doing
That is
today,
me.
sir?
Good. Thank you so much for having me on the show, Dave. I appreciate it.
No, look at you, mister. Got all the cool microphone and the headset over there. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's you're
He's
gonna
got
sound.
a professional microphone. You see that brand of microphone? He's
No,
got?
I don't. I can't see that from here.
Yeah, that's not a cheap one. Let me put it that
Yeah,
way.
look at you, man. We even got you got a little bit of microphone envy going on over here with one of my techs. That,
All of us audio nerds, I guess, right?
yeah, I guess so. Here I am. You can't even, I don't even have a microphone, right? I'm just yelling in space. So, I mean, we're doing the best we can over here with what we got. Trying to keep it a little together on the news desk. All right, Jeremy Thone, here it is. You are the director of marketing over at 3PL Systems, correct?
Yep, I'm the director of marketing, and I also host a show called 3PL Live, which I created. Done about 75 episodes of that so far.
How many?
75 so far, and everyone has like every episode is completely edited with custom album art, and then we've interviewed quite a few people on the show. We've had Craig Fuller, the founder of Freight Waves, Andy Paul, the author of Sell Without Selling Out, Lindsay Cardasso, the VP of growth over at Enride Trucks. So we've had quite a few heavy hitters in the freight industry, and yeah, it's been a really fun project for me.
Yeah, I've had a couple of those people in here as well, as you may know, Jeremy, here on the show. I'll tell you, it's a lot of fun to be able to talk to these experts in the industry, and you get them on your show, and I get to do it. I've been doing this show now, not in this current format, but in some format or another, almost 3 years now, and had a great opportunity to talk to, ask questions. Let me ask you a simple question while we're going and doing that. Your favorite was one of your first, right?
Yeah, Craig Fuller was definitely one of my favorites. That was really interesting just because I know his family's so involved, like at the freight industry with his family owning Covenant and some of the US Express. So I thought that was really interesting. And I thought it was also interesting that someone that already had such a successful company would be willing to talk to, a newer podcaster. But I think that it's really great that what you guys are doing at BCB Live, and then, we have like the Freight Coach and all these other people out there in the community. They're kind of podcasters now, which I think is more interesting and kind of a more fun way to learn.
Yeah, we do. We do every day. We use Sonar here as well, and we do the market everywhere in trucking every Tuesday. Sir Rick gets on and does a lot to try to explain some of the things in the market that's going on that we take for granted, or that we look out there and try to predict and try to see some of the trend lines going on. It's pretty interesting and necessary that we all have a better understanding of what's going on if we're going to make good and positive changes in the industry. I'll tell you, let me ask you, as you've interviewed some of these people on your show, have you found that you've done things differently or looked at things differently going forward after your interview? I can tell you I have. Have you found that, in marketing and in your own job, did you go, you know what, that's probably a different way to look at that, and we need to do that?
Yeah, definitely, all the time. For example, like Dan Hellman came on the show. He's the CRO over at HubTech, and they had some sort of automation where they were bringing in basically a load from an email and then putting that load into a TMS. So I think a lot of the times when you're talking to these folks, it's always about like clean data, about making sure that the data is clean, and then if the data is clean, then other things such as robotic process automation or machine learning or AI can come. I know that we've had a lot more machine learning and true AI coming into the industry as well, a lot with like truckload capacity. I know the folks over at Parade AI and Cargo Chief are also doing a lot with the full truckload market since it's so fragmented. So yeah, I have to say that all those like leaders and people that are really involved in the tech, you start thinking a lot differently about how things are done, and if a process could be automated, if it's something that's could be repeated over and over again, it's usually pretty ripe for automation as far as like TMSs go and technology and freight.
Yeah, we you can probably tell I've been here a while. I'm a little bit in the industry a little bit longer than some. But I will tell you that as you look back and you take it and you talk about it, and one of the things that you were discussing was like optimizers and all these things that help people do things better. I'll tell you, generally, 30 years ago, we didn't have a lot of data to go off of. We didn't have trends. We didn't have, only until the accountants got the information in it, and it was days later, if not weeks later, or even a month later, when we could analyze what we had done. And by then it was really too late to react accordingly, correct?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting how quickly everything has changed. I would say over the last couple of years, a lot of people like that are true technologists, like our CEO is a technologist, and he was always saying that like a lot of AI machine learning, it wasn't really in our industry like as of a few years ago, but now it seems like there's a lot more tech coming in and a lot of guys from like Silicon Valley. And I think it was a lot to do with just COVID and the broken supply chain. It really gave us a seat at the table for like the rest of like the community and everyone around the world. So I think that a lot of venture money got pumped into our system as a result of that.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. You know, to me, once the ELD mandate came about and everybody had a data system within a tractor, right, that pumped out all this information of where you are, hours of service, where you're headed, where the truck is, where, you know, how miles per hour, fuel efficiency. And I mean, all of this, we were hit with a tidal wave of information, Jeremy, across the industry. And you talk about clean data. There was none. It was just crazy. And here we are, you're talking to these people that truly, and tell me if I'm wrong, a lot of the people that you interview today are more about interviewing about the data that has to do with what we're doing in trucking than ever before. I mean, as you've done 75 interviews and you look back, genuinely, we're talking about people that are talking about enhancing trucking today by using technology, right? Mm-hmm. More than a better way to drive a tractor.
Yeah, it seems to be a lot to do with like the data, the technology, making sure that the data is clean and standardized. I've seen a lot of that. I didn't realize, for example, even like the truckload market, what they're solving over at Parade and Cargo Chief, there's just so many pieces of like truckload data all over the place as far as like emails being sent to inboxes about like what available trucks there are. But a lot of that data was like not being used before and it wasn't being properly organized. So it's interesting to see just a lot of this data being organized for like useful information for like, hey, book this particular truckload carrier now with a book now button. A lot of that stuff didn't really seem to exist just like maybe like 5 years ago. So I think it's really interesting to see kind of the automation and the digitization of our industry right in front of us.
Yeah, and I'm just going to tell you, and as an industry, our efficiency on running trucks is still bad. I mean, right? I mean, hours of service, your drivers got 70. On an average across the country, you're only using about 60%, 65% of his potential earning. That hurts both driver, that hurts carrier, that hurts the industry, and it helps create a driver shortage when we could solve some of those issues, some, not all, but we could solve a lot of those issues right away with that technology, right, to be more efficient at what we do.
100%, and especially like the dead miles and like the carbon footprint of like running trucks without actually having anything in them. It just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense for the environment. So not only I think it will help the truck drivers, but it also probably help the environment if we kind of get some of these deadhead miles in control. And I also felt it's going to be interesting to see what happens with some of these autonomous trucks. I don't know how quickly that's going to come into play, but maybe for like the long haul, they might be a little bit interesting for the line haul part of trucking.
You know, I'll go to that. I was at the Women in Trucking conference this week, and Waymo was there with their tractor on the floor, and it's already being able to run autonomously in some capacity. I know there's specific lanes that they're wanting to utilize them in. I'm telling you, I'm not scared of it. If it helps, I mean, we're going to need technology in this industry. The one thing I like about technology in trucks is that it will always make the safest decision first. You know, I think that to me excites me about trucking with autonomous vehicle is that no matter what, the autonomous vehicle is going to decide what to do safe before it decides anything else. And I think we as humans sometimes are infallible and don't always make that decision, right? I mean, I wish we did, but we sometimes don't always make the safe decision first. And I'm excited about the possibility of where it is and what it's going on. I'm just curious how that's going to play out in the courtrooms when it's just a machine and not a person that makes the bad decision. Because ultimately, you're going to have to make one bad decision, whether it's a school bus of children or it's the retirement bus on the left. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it just depends when that's going to happen and how that's going to play out. But I hope that it doesn't happen that way. But at some point, you and I both realize it's going to be weird how that, or challenging when it comes to how it's going to play out in the legal system.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens if there is like an accident and one of those autonomous trucks crashes into something. I'm sure that it's going to be like maybe like state by state. You know, I heard Arizona's pretty lenient as far as like testing goes. I've seen like some articles of trucks going on and off the freeway, getting on, getting off. So I don't know. I think it'll eventually come, but also like the technology is interesting as well for like just software in general, just because a lot of that AI or machine learning and data, it doesn't stop. It just keeps on going. So like if there's stuff, the information that is sent to a brokerage like later at night, some of this machine learning could take over, or even just like put in a load into the system, for example, to quote it. So there's a lot of interesting things like where machines don't really stop. So that's the part that's a little bit fascinating. But yeah, as far as safety goes, if it crashes, if the truck crashes into something, yeah, it's going to be a bit of a nightmare, obviously.
It's never good. It's never good. All right, Jeremy, let's talk a little bit about your podcast. You said you've done 70. How often do you do a podcast? I'm just curious. How often? What's the frequency by which you do it?
Yeah, the frequency is about every week. Sometimes it's every other week because I'm also the director of marketing, handle all of our internal communications, all of our events. We have an event coming up with Parade. We had one about a month ago with Cargo Chief over Chris Arredondo. So kind of depending on what's going on, like I always have the podcast going and then use that also to clip out videos of our partners to our LinkedIn channel as well. So it's just a nice way of like having this deep communication channel with our current clients as well.
I think, I truly, you're preaching a little bit to the choir, but I would like to hear why you decided to get a podcast going and when you already have a current position, a job, and what you have, and kind of what propelled you into doing this in your outfit. Kind of tell me your thought process as you created this.
Yeah, so I studied music for quite a while. I studied drums and piano, so I was already kind of like an audio person. So I still take weekly piano lessons. But I ended up applying to go on Dooner's show with the truck on FreightWaves. And I had such a good time with Michael Vincent and Dooner, and they were really kind to me, like coming on the show, and I thought it was really fun and kind of an interesting way to create content. And I'm a big fan of content and dark social, like all the content that's shared in channels that aren't being actually like a lot of times like a person might take a screenshot of something from your show and then share it like in a Slack channel, and that information's not being recorded by like any sort of like sales attribution channels. So I also realized that like the content was powerful. It was kind of like this engine happening in the background to kind of stay in touch with people. So I reached out to Dooner and asked him for advice on like what kind of microphone to get, and then he gave me the advice of you either have like a condenser mic or you have a dynamic mic. So I ended up getting a dynamic mic. This is the Shure MV7. And then he also pointed me in the right direction for getting this piece of equipment called the Rodecaster Pro. I recently updated to the Rodecaster Pro 2. It's just like a board to help you record all your audio and sound effects, and you can change your voice and pitch it and do all sorts of weird stuff like that. So I got to say, like Dooner, he could have been like he was already pretty well known at that time, pretty famous in our industry. So he could have been, just blew me off, but he was very kind to me and just kind of pointed me in the right direction. And the other piece of advice that he gave me was just press the record button, because a lot of people in the podcasting space have imposter syndrome, or they feel like, what do I have to offer? What do I have to share? There's a lot of that going on. A lot of people are scared to put themselves out there. So I always encourage it. If you want to do it, go ahead and give it a go, because it's definitely encouraging.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you, a lot's changed in the way which I look at things and talk about them. Having done this for about 3 years, in it, not that I was ever shy, I'm by any stretch of the imagination or withdrawn. That probably would have been good at some point. But let me ask you, how do you? And it's difficult for me too. How do you balance this job and the other job? and ultimately to try to do the best at both? I mean, how do you do that?
Yeah, I think they actually augment each other, to be completely honest, because a lot of the content that I create, like for example, we have a large shipper that uses Brokerware or TMS over in Utah, and one of our clients ended up processing 1,700 shipments on a Saturday by himself. And if you did, I don't know, if you saved like just 5 minutes, it was like over like 100 hours of labor saved by just using some automation. So it also kind of just gives me a little bit deeper understanding of things happening within the industry. I remember actually talking to Adam Robinson about a year ago about Parade. So I was sort of, I'm always a little bit ahead of everyone that I know, specifically just because of, having that connection with everyone in the industry. It kind of keeps you plugged in, if you will.
Yeah, it's nice to know a lot of people because when something's hot off the presses, it usually runs through our stuff pretty quickly, right? I mean, we get to hear it first and get to talk about it first and get a chance to discuss it with those that because we're always looking to talk to somebody that's got a shout out about something that's happening. Or, like I love it when Atri comes out with a report because I've got them on, right? I got to have them on. And so here we are. You said something here, and you didn't mention it, but you said in one of our notes about the metaverse and how you discuss the metaverse here on a podcast about trucking. Go ahead and tell me about that.
Yeah, so I've had other guests on the show that are just not only in trucking. I've had like Andy Paul on the show, for example. He's the author of Sell Without Selling Out. He's a best-selling author in the SaaS community because obviously everyone needs to sell, right? If you're in sales or marketing or anything. So I occasionally have people on there that are marketing experts as well. But I had the opportunity to interview someone from the Star Atlas metaverse. They're building this crazy game that looks like Star Wars on Solana's network. And that's a little bit more like in the lines of Web3. And I do think that blockchain and Web3 might have some sort of role in freight, but it's probably going to be way off into the future. So I always want to keep a little bit one step ahead of anything that I can, essentially, just because I know that eventually it will hit this, but it's probably not going to be for like 10 years.
So I know you got a lot going on, and you're talking about some really cool things. But where do you see yourself heading in the next? I'm gonna try to get, where do you see you heading with your podcast, and where are you trying to target as we move forward, and what kind of information are you wanting to bring to your podcast?
Yeah, I mean, the main role of the podcast is a lot around freight tech. So anyone that's basically doing interesting things in the freight tech world, whether that's basically truckload capacity. I know truckload capacity has been kind of like a hot topic over the last couple years. So a lot of the features lately have been on like Parade and Cargo Chief. But really, like anyone, also like newer entrepreneurs, there was a company called Carrier Source, Rob Light. I believe they went on your show as well. But they were doing this, basically this Yelp-style carrier review on trucking. So I got them on the show as well. So a lot of it's also just bringing up the people that are smaller that might not have a voice, but are entrepreneurs and they're doing interesting thing in freight tech. So I think it's like the combination of those things. It's like the people that are up and coming in the industry, people that I find fascinating from watching shows like yours, and then just anyone that could really add value to our audience. But our audience tends to be like around people that are in freight tech and technology and things of that nature.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I had Carrier Source on here as well, Jeremy, and I enjoyed what it is that they're bringing to the table, and that it makes sense, especially with the next gen coming up and as the younger people coming into the industry, they embrace technology a lot more, and are going to use things like, Yelp in trucking, right? I mean, they're going to use that kind of stuff a lot more because my daughter won't go eat somewhere unless she looks at the review, right? I mean, I'm the guy that looks at the sign, okay? That's how I know I want to eat there. And I'm just going to tell you, Jeremy, I probably want to eat there anyway. That's how I know if it's good. But younger daughter, she wants to look at how many people thought it looked good. And I think that's what we're talking about, right? I mean, honestly,
100%.
That's what we're talking about. We're talking about that mentality. And I think it's a good thing. I think it's fine. I think the community, this is what is really going on. And I just throwing that out you, Jeremy, that when you doing your podcast and BCB Live doing it's showcast, and we're all trying to generate good, positive information or something about the issues at hand, I think we're bringing our community together, especially in trucking. We
100%.
we focus on safety here. Our genuine 100% idea behind our show is safety first. That's what we want to talk about. That's what we do. But I think if you want to be well-rounded in the industry, you got to talk to people like Jeremy about what they're doing out there and how they can do it. And if you get anybody on your show, Jeremy, that you want to make sure you point them our direction, right? Make sure you spin them around and to let them know that over at BCB Live, we probably want to talk to them too, man. I appreciate you coming on today. You letting us a little know. When can we expect your next podcast, sir?
There's one actually coming out today, so I will have one released this afternoon.
And they can hear that on all the other all the places.
Spotify, Apple, 3PL Live website, and then I'll probably post something on our 3PL Systems LinkedIn as well.
You want to give us a teaser?
On the show that's coming out today?
Yeah, just give me a small teaser.
Yeah, that is a good question. Give me one.
You're not, it's okay. If you don't want to tell it, if you want to keep your trade secrets, Jeremy, I'm good. I thought maybe you might want to give BCB Live that breakthrough information.
Yeah, the one that I actually really enjoyed, the last one was with Maria Spector. She's actually a marketing director. I just released that one actually last week. So anyone that's really interested in copy, that was a really good episode to watch, because obviously as we're podcasters, doing copy and writing good hooks on LinkedIn is very important if you want your content to stand out. So I do focus a little bit on that as well on the show, because I realize that if the copy doesn't get in front of people and people don't resonate with it, then it's going to be hard for people to actually read it.
Yeah, it's important. I think it's necessary that we get heard. If we're out there talking, we want to be heard. I'll tell you what, Jeremy, do me a favor. Before you get out of here, I ask all our guests when they've been on here, if they get a chance, they state their name, who they're with, and that you're watching BCB Live, the safest station in the nation. Can you do that, sir?
Absolutely. Hey, this is Jeremy Thone. I am the marketing director of 3PL Systems and also the host of the 3PL Live podcast. And you are listening to BCB Live, the safest station in the nation. And thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely, Jeremy. Thank you so much for coming on, man. We appreciate you.